Welcome to Paranormal, where the shadows whisper and true stories blur the line between reality and nightmare. Every encounter shared here is real and far more disturbing than fiction. Dare to listen? It was the 4th of July, and fireworks painted the night sky in vibrant bursts of red, white, and gold. The narrator, an overnight caregiver at a small adult care facility, stood just outside the building with her young daughter. Together, they watched the celebratory lights dance above them, unaware that something far more disturbing was waiting just above their heads. The building had 2 floors. The ground level housed 3 elderly residents who couldn't climb stairs, all of whom remained on site during the holiday. The second floor, however, was vacant for the weekend. Its usual occupants were away with family. Earlier that day, the narrator had gone upstairs to tidy up the rooms, do a quick check, and crack open a few windows to let the summer air circulate. She had felt fine. Nothing unusual. No sense of being watched. No unease. The windows had opened without trouble, the silence broken only by the creak of old wood and the muffled sounds of holiday cheer drifting in from outside. But now, standing below one of those very windows, she and her daughter were startled by a sudden, violent noise. Slam! The window directly above them had just been forcefully shut. Not pushed by a breeze. Not gently nudged by the old hinges. It had been slammed. Hard. The kind of slam that vibrates through your chest and instantly awakens that primal sense that something is wrong. Both mother and daughter stared upward, frozen. There was no one up there. No staff. No residents. No one at all. Access to the second floor was only through the main staircase inside, completely secure. And she would have heard someone moving if they'd gone up. But something had slammed that window. The unease lingered with her long after the boom of the fireworks faded. She had worked many nights at that facility. Nothing quite like this had happened before. Or so she thought. Overnights were quiet, and thankfully, she was allowed to bring her 7-year-old daughter with her. The girl usually slept peacefully on a couch in the living room while her mother tended to residents, checked vitals, managed meds, and handled any surprises that came up during the graveyard shift. But one night changed everything. It was just after 3 a.m. The narrator was in the kitchen, completing paperwork when her daughter approached silently. Her steps were slow. Her expression off. She didn't speak, because she couldn't. Her mouth was full. Not with food, but with something that looked foreign. She opened it, revealing strands of clear plastic. Fishing line. Long, translucent filaments, tangled and knotted inside her mouth. One after another, the narrator pulled them out. 4 inches, 5 inches, 6 inches at a time. Her hands trembled as she extracted more and more. It was impossible to say how much had been in there. Maybe feet worth, maybe more. Finally, when the child could speak, she said something that made the narrator's stomach twist. I woke up, and it was already in my mouth. There was no fishing gear in the facility. No reason for that line to exist, let alone be stuffed inside a sleeping child's mouth. The implication was terrifying. Someone, or something, had done this. And that meant the disturbing presence in the building wasn't just lingering in hallways and empty rooms. It was interacting. It had crossed the line from mysterious to malicious. From then on, the narrator started noticing other strange events. Small, seemingly disconnected at first, but consistent. There was an elderly resident named Mrs. C, a sweet woman with late-stage dementia who had once been a Sunday school teacher. She often required help walking back to her room after dinner. On more than one occasion, as the narrator guided her past the living room, Mrs. C would pause, her wrinkled face lighting up with joy. Who are all these people? Are they having a party? But the room was always empty. Not just empty, completely still. No music. No talking. No furniture moved. Just shadows and silence. Yet Mrs. C would smile as if seeing an entire crowd. Shed point, even wave. I used to love parties like that, Shed whisper. And that's where her daughter slept. Right there on the couch, night after night. It was like layers of reality existed inside that building. The living and the dead crossing paths, sometimes unaware of each other, sometimes not. But what came next would shatter any lingering doubt. There was a man in the facility, known to staff and residents alike as R. An inappropriate, vulgar elderly gentleman who often referred to himself as a dirty old man, had harassed caregivers with crude jokes and had a disturbing habit of exposing himself and laughing about it afterward. The staff didn't like him, but they managed him. One night, around midnight, the narrator was in the room adjacent to RS, assisting another resident with a colostomy bag. RS and the other room were connected by a shared bathroom, but separated by closed doors. Nothing unusual was happening, until R suddenly began screaming for help. That wasn't out of character. R yelled a lot. He'd often cry wolf to get attention, especially from female staff. The narrator called out that Shed be there shortly. He shouted again, more urgently this time. She wrapped up quickly, washed her hands, and moved through the connecting bathroom. And then she saw it. R was on the floor, his nightgown torn, and his face smeared with something dark and sticky. At first, she thought it was chocolate. Maybe something from a candy stash left over from the holidays. She chuckled nervously and flicked on the light. The sight that greeted her turned her blood to ice. It wasn't chocolate. It was blood. A horrific amount of it. On his face. In his hair. Pooled on the floor. Splattered across the walls. She rushed to his side, helped him back into bed, and tried to keep him conscious. He was dazed, but awake. She asked what happened. And his answer? A boy came into my room, he mumbled. He beat me with a stick. A boy? There were no boys in the building. No children. No visitors. And the narrator had been in the next room the entire time. No one had passed through the hallway. No one had entered or exited his room. It was impossible. Or at least, it should have been. Even when the paramedics arrived, R repeated the same story, a boy with a stick. No hesitation. No embellishment. Just the same eerie tale. Over and over again. He was taken to the hospital and died from his injuries within hours. Then came the police. The questioning. The suspicion. The cold eyes examining the narrator's arms and clothing for traces of blood. She knew they were trying to piece together a narrative, one that could easily place blame on her. She was the only staff member on duty. No security cameras. No eyewitnesses. Only a dying man's story about an invisible boy. She could feel the danger closing in. In a place like that, even innocence might not save you. But eventually, the other resident, the one she had been helping, confirmed her whereabouts during the incident. Her friend, who owned the facility, vouched for her too. And there was no physical evidence connecting her to the assault. They let her go. But something inside her broke. The building had always felt strange. The cold spots. The slamming windows. The invisible party guests. Her daughter choking on plastic line that came from nowhere. But now, someone had died. Whatever haunted that place was no longer content with lurking in the corners. It had lashed out. Violently. And that boy? Whoever, or whatever, he had crossed over from the shadows into their world. Not as a harmless echo of the past, but as something much worse. Something capable of hurting. Of killing. She started researching hauntings, portals, and energy fields. It was the only explanation that made any sense to her anymore. Perhaps the facility had been built on a place where the veil between worlds was thinner. Maybe the dead still walked those halls, confused or angry. Whatever the reason, she knew she couldn't stay. Her friend, the owner, understood. Within days, she found a replacement for the narrator, who handed in her resignation without a second thought. She never went back. Her next job couldn't have been more different, working at a lumber mill, pulling green chain, a tough, gritty position with long hours and physical labor. But it was honest work, loud, grounded. The hum of machines was a welcome change from whispers in the dark. No shadows moved on their own. No windows slammed shut. No boys with sticks. Just reality. Hard, unshakable, and real. Sometimes, when she looks back, she wonders if it was all just her imagination. But then she remembers her daughter choking on fishing line. R.S. lifeless body. Mrs. C smiling at empty rooms. And the blood. So much blood. Some places aren't meant for the living. Some doors open and never close. And sometimes, those who pass through aren't content to remain unseen. Thank you for joining us on this chilling journey into one caregiver's harrowing experience. One that blurs the line between the living and the dead. It's stories like these that remind us, not all hauntings are distant echoes. Some leave lasting scars. If this story gave you chills, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with those who dare to believe. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.